Recording.
Value Investing 2012, Part 2. My name is Ron Hosen, and I've already told you about the spectacular record that I've put together over the last 3 to 5 years. Since I'm not selling anything, and since I trade only on one account, my niece's account, and since I don't charge her for this service, I'm essentially an amateur and I can do what I want. However, I think you could benefit by trading alongside of me if you agree with my philosophy and if you do your own work and come to the same conclusions. The other things that are likely to be scarce in the world besides oil is water, clean water for drinking, water for agriculture, certain minerals that are useful, certain chemicals that are valuable in producing fertilizers will be important because the demand for food and the demand for crops to feed animals who then can be slaughtered and eaten is growing dramatically now and is likely to grow more. There are seed companies that come out with innovations that can raise the productivity of farmers. But the prices of these stocks already recognize whatever genius is embodied in these innovations. The more you can purchase something that's just valuable in itself because it's scarce, not because of the brains of the people who produced it, because there's always a possibility that we'll end up with a surplus of brains. If you do, then the product of the brains will become plentiful, and it won't be profitable. Let me suggest that you think about why you're owning a stock. If you choose to purchase a natural resource stock, you would be doing it in order to purchase indirectly the underlying reserves these companies have. Most equities, most shares of stock that trade in the world trade based on momentum. People become excited because they go up, and then they buy them because if it's going up, they can always sell it to somebody else who had a delayed excitatory response, and the last person out is the one that takes the loss. This is the nature of technology stocks. The people who are responsible for developing companies that produce very, very valuable technological changes are not necessarily people whose stocks can be converted to income by an investor. What you have to do is you have to be quicker and smarter about out-trading somebody. There's nothing inherent in the piece of paper or the computer entry that notes that you own something. If they don't pay dividends, you can't touch any money that they earn. It depends on there being somebody who will pay a higher price than you pay. And it doesn't matter whether the company did something terrific or whether the trader is dropping acid. There's no assurance that there's going to be any benefits. So, take a stock like Apple. From watching CNBC, I've come to the conclusion that this is the greatest company in the history of the world. Or at least that's what I'm being told. And it may be. I don't know how to buy shares of companies that are the greatest companies in the history of the world. Because I'm selling it to another human being who has to have a more glorified idea about what it's worth, and that could be based on anything. So, when you buy something like that, it may go up. Apple happens to have increasing earnings, and they have new products, and they're quite profitable. And they're sitting on $50 billion in cash. But that's not why, that's not why the stock goes up. The stock goes up because a lot of people who are gamblers believe that it's going to go up, and that it's going to go up until it stops going up, and they're going to be the ones who sell at the top. Maybe. I have no advice to offer in that domain. The only water companies I've been able to identify, one is PICO. PICO is the symbol, PICO Holdings. And they own water in the Nevada desert. I mean, they have this big container, and it's got water in it. And when people are dying of thirst on the desert there, they can transport some of their water. They also have obtained water rights in areas where water is scarce. And if they're smart enough at it, they could make a profit. But it's not like oil. It's much more subject to political considerations. The Sao Paulo water utility has been, for me, a good investment. The symbol is SBS. It pays a dividend, and it's expanded its water holdings. But it's subject to political constraints. Brazil and Brazilian stocks are doing extremely well, and it's certainly, to me, much less risky than investing in a country like India. But it's overpriced at the moment. So if SBS goes down below 40, I think it merits a look. PICO is below 30, and I've traded that for the last couple of years. When it gets down to 28, I buy it, and when it gets up to 33, 34, I sell it. It has to own water for me to be able to play around with it, but it hasn't been the water sales that caused the stock to go up. It's just been the market. There's a company called Seadrill, SDRL. It's a deep water oil driller in Norway. It trades on the New York Stock Exchange. I recently sold it at something like a 50% profit. I just couldn't resist. But it's going down today. This company pays 7.5% to 8% dividends. They have growing earnings, and their price to free cash flow is like maybe 12 to 1. That's just incredible for somebody in a risky area like deep water drilling. They have the most modern drilling fleet in the world. And deep water drilling is an area that's hot and will remain hot. In general, I think betting on the owners of oil reserves, but not natural gas reserves. I think that this is basically a bet against America. I mean, I believe that GM is going to start producing large numbers of SUVs, and the Americans who can afford them, and about half of the population of the United States, actually makes a living. And that half, maybe 25%, could afford an SUV. Now, GM depends on selling cars in China that resemble 1970 Hondas, but they can't sell those in the U.S. So what they'll be selling here is what they've always sold. And that requires crude oil converted to gasoline. There have been some efforts, particularly by Boone Pickens, who has a lot of natural gas holdings, but also, seems to have a certain amount of civic pride, civic orientation, to induce the United States to substitute wind power for what natural gas provides now in the way of a boiler fuel for electricity, for generating electricity. And then taking the natural gas and converting it to a fuel that can run trucks and buses and perhaps automobiles. The technology is available. China has huge fleets of buses, and I think Minneapolis does too. Has fleets of buses that run on natural gas. It's cleaner burning, and natural gas is abundant in the U.S. That's why no natural gas companies can actually make a profit, because there's so much of it. And so the market price is below cost. I think we can depend on the United States to make the dumb decision. That is, to not make use of natural gas. The promise of natural gas has seduced me for 30 years. It's broken my heart. In 1980, it broke my heart in 2000, and it broke my heart a couple of years ago. Stay the hell away from natural gas, or anything else that requires an American economy that's functioning well. So, how are we doing in time?
Keep going.
Okay.
Or
so, as long, given the current Federal Reserve Board, as long as the U.S. economy is showing no growth or minimal growth, at the moment, at the bottom of the 2008 recession, the U.S. was creating 4 million jobs a month. Today it's creating 4 million jobs a month. It also eliminates 4 million jobs a month, whereas in 2008, 6 million people were being fired, 4 million hired. Today it's about even.